Apple Inc. was started in 1976 by Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak, who lived in Silicon Valley in California. At the time, Steve Jobs was 21 years old and Steve Wozniak was 26. Both Steves had dropped out of college, but both had similar interests in computers. Wozniak worked for HP, who at the time only made calculators and microprocessors. Wozniak wrote the basic program language for the microprocessors and used to hand out copies of his work to his friends. Jobs worked at Atari and saw an opportunity to market and sell these microprocessors. Jobs sold his car, a Volkswagen, for startup cash. Wozniak sold his programmable calculator, and together they had raised over $1,300 to start their own business. With that startup money, they began producing the first Apple I boards. The first computer retail store placed an order for 50 Apple I computers, which they paid $500 apiece for. Later, Jobs and Wozniak sold the Apple I computers for $666, even though Jobs wanted to sell them for $100 more. Wozniak thought that was too high. In 1977, the Apple I was replaced by the Apple II computer, which was significantly more advanced than its predecessor. Jobs and Wozniak are credited as the founders of the company and of the company's success. Bill Fernandez was the first employee hired by the two Steves. Mike Markula was the money man and invested $250,000 in Apple and owned 30% of the company. He also helped manage the company and develop its business plan. Gary Martin was in charge of accounting. He joined the company under the assumption that it would flop, but he wanted to work with his friends. Sherry Livingston was the first secretary at Apple. Apple first gained recognition from the Apple I personal computer, and in 1977 they released the Apple II with colored graphics and significant hardware and software improvements. In 1980 they released the Apple III and really began to gain national recognition. Sales began to increase exponentially. In 1980, with 3 generations of Apple computers under their belt and national recognition, they launched an IPO of Apple stock. It generated more capital than any IPO since the Ford Motor Company in 1956, and instantly created more millionaires, about 300, than any company in history. In 1984, during the Super Bowl, they debuted a single national broadcast commercial that was considered a masterpiece. After the first year, Apple was worth $700,000 in 1976, and rose to be worth a couple $100 million in the mid-1980s. When Jobs left the company in 1985, for the next 10 years the company would struggle to stay relevant. In the mid-1990s, Jobs returned, and today the company is currently estimated to be worth over $800 billion. Apple is expected to be a trillion-dollar company very soon. Apple has made significant contributions in the tech world as well. The first generation iPod was released in 2001 and is still used today. The iPod Touch was released in 2007, and the design and OS was later used to create the iPhone. The original iPad was released in 2010. It included Wi-Fi, cellular connectivity, as well as a multi-touch screen and virtual keyboard. Apple would eventually release the iPad 2, iPad mini, and iPad Air models in later years. iWeb Services was released in 2000, and in 2007 the first iPhone was released. Later the iPhone 4, 4S, 5, 5C, 5S, 6, and 6 Plus were released. iOS is used on all Apple devices and provides the same format and display between the iPhone to the iPad to the Mac. The latest version, 8.1, focuses on being user-friendly and connecting all of the devices. Apple has revolutionized the music industry with its launch in 2003 of iTunes. In 2010, Apple celebrated the 10th billion downloaded song on iTunes. iTunes has also been made available on Windows. The original Mac OS X was released in 2001. The newest version of Mac OS X, Yosemite, was released in September of 2014. Apple's strategic plans for the future will be centered around interconnectivity of all its devices. It will also focus on manufacturing to alleviate delays in product releases. They plan to continue to improve on the foundation of the iPhone and maybe more so on the foundation of the iPad. Apple will introduce its new iWatch in early 2015, and there are rumors that they may begin making their own TV. It is clear with the releases of the new iPhone that bigger is what Apple is after. They will continue to spend heavily in the R&D department to create faster hardware and increased resolution on all of their devices. With the release of iOS 8, the AI functionality has been improved and will continue to be a point of emphasis in the future. Apple Pay has been released, making it easier to buy things with your phone. Apple will also continue to research encryption technology and biometrics for future devices. Apple believes the tablet is the future, and it is speculated that it will begin moving away from the PC altogether. They will focus on devices that continue to be easy to use with reduction and simplicity in mind at all times. Apple will continue to advance in cloud computing and innovative new technologies to continue to increase future revenue and continue to grow.